All right, let's dive right into this explainer and, really decode the complex tactical decisions behind modern combat. Today, we're looking at the anatomy of a strike, specifically the mechanics of asymmetric warfare. We're going to do this by walking through a super high-stakes, hypothetical clash between the US military and Iran. We're breaking down exactly how modern forces detect, intercept, and hit back, using the actual hardware and strategies deployed out there in the real world today.
To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to picture the pitch-black Persian Gulf. It's quiet until, suddenly, radar screens inside a U.S. command center just light up. Deadly, one-way attack drones are flying in fast, and they're tracking at incredibly low altitudes straight toward commercial shipping. So the big question is, how exactly does a modern, multi-billion-dollar military actually neutralize this kind of low-cost but extremely high-threat swarm?
Section 1, the Midnight Drone Swarm. Okay, let's set the stage for our scenario. Imagine it's the very early hours of May 28, 2026, and a super fragile ceasefire in the region is being pushed to the absolute breaking point.
The alarm blares across the combat information centers of U.S. warships. 4 Iranian one-way attack drones are airborne. But while the fleet is tracking these radar signatures up in the sky, there's a far more critical countdown happening on the ground. Deep within a compound near the strategic port of Bandar Abbas, real-time overhead intel shows a drone control team isn't just sitting back and watching the attack. No, they are actively spooling up a 5th drone on a mobile launch rail, getting ready to trigger a secondary wave.
So the clock is officially ticking. U.S. Central Command has less than 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, before that 5th drone ignites and joins this already deadly swarm. Section 2. Blinding the swarm. Before that 5th drone can launch, let's just explicitly pause the clock for a second. Because, shooting down a drone swarm isn't just about throwing bullets and missiles at it. First, you literally have to blind them in midair. The immediate response relies on what we call an invisible kill chain. The carrier strike group sends up F-18 Super Hornets, but, and this is absolutely crucial, they don't fly alone. Trailing right behind them is an EA-18G Growler. Inside that jet, an electronic warfare officer is working a multi-million-dollar jamming suite. Since these incoming drones rely on GPS or active radio links to navigate, the Growler's job is to isolate those highly encrypted data streams. It then blasts high-powered directional energy straight at the targets, basically severing their connection to the launch site entirely. So blinded and losing all their telemetry, the swarm's coordination just instantly collapses. It's like a flock of birds suddenly forgetting how to fly together. And that is what lets the F-18 Super Hornets move in for the kill. Coming in hot, the fighters use these incredibly agile AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles to lock right onto the heat signatures of the drone's tiny piston engines, just blasting them out of the sky over open water. Or, pilots can literally switch to gun mode, line up the crosshairs, and physically shred the drones that way. Section 3. Striking the source. Okay, unpausing the clock now, because shooting down the swarm, that's really only half the battle. To actually guarantee success and stop that secondary wave from launching, the U.S. military has to go straight to the source of the kill chain and vaporize the launchers. To do this without risking real human pilots inside Iran's incredibly dense air defense networks, Central Command goes for a precision standoff strike. A Navy-guided missile destroyer sitting safely out of range launches a Tomahawk cruise missile. Erupting from the ship, it drops super low, flying at subsonic speeds. It actually uses advanced terrain contouring radar to physically hug the landscape. It's essentially weaving through the terrain, staying totally below the enemy's coastal early warning radars, right up until it calculates its final precision terminal dive. Boom! The Tomahawk strikes the ground control station and the drone launchers directly. And this hit triggers a massive secondary explosion, because the fuel and payload of that 5th drone we talked about, they detonate all at once. In one surgical strike, the command hub, the launch mechanics, and that remaining threat are, entirely vaporized. Section 4. The overkill question. Now things instantly escalate from here. In response to the U.S. strike, an Iranian drone carrier launches a Shahed 139 directly toward the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group, which is transiting the Arabian Sea. To intercept this incoming threat, the carrier sends up an F-35C Lightning stealth fighter. And man, this brings us to one of the most fascinating, honestly almost absurd paradoxes of asymmetric warfare. Why on earth would you deploy a $100 million stealth jet to shoot down a $70,000 drone in the dead of night? I mean, on paper, doesn't that just sound like complete overkill?
Well, the answer comes down to a fundamental naval strategy called defense in depth. Basically, the absolute #1 priority is engaging incoming threats as far away from the actual ship as physically possible. Think about it. If you're waiting to rely on the ship's own close-in weapon systems or its guns, that means the drone is already within 2 miles. And if your interception fails at that range, yeah, that is way, way too close for comfort. Using that F-35C actually gives the Navy massive tactical advantages. First off, it pushes the interception out 50 to 100 miles away. That gives you a nice buffer to try again if the first shot misses. Second, having a human eye on it is huge. A blip on a radar screen can't tell you if a drone is carrying a camera or a high-explosive warhead, but a pilot, using insane sensor fusion and a helmet-mounted display, they can track a target right through the clouds and darkness for a visual ID. Plus, the fighter acts as a last-ditch tool for de-escalation. The pilot can literally signal a warning. When the drone just keeps coming, ignoring standard hails, well, intent is clearly hostile. That's when the pilot fires an AIM-9X and destroys the airframe instantly.
Section 5, Iran's retaliation playbook. So, despite losing that drone site at Bandar Abbas, Iran is definitely not out of the fight. They still retain roughly 30 to 40% of their missile launchers completely intact, so they immediately pivot to a coordinated retaliation strategy. So how exactly do they hit back? Well, since it's incredibly hard for them to target highly mobile U.S. warships out on the open water, Iran shifts their focus. They go for a massive show of force against stationary targets. Basically, they target U.S. air bases to prove to the region and the world that even after taking a heavy beating, they still possess some very formidable fighting power. What are their high-value priorities here? The goal is to overwhelm American defenses and inflict massive damage. A primary target would undoubtedly be Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. This is a massive facility. It's the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, hosting around 8,000 American troops, and it serves as CENTCOM headquarters. Other top-tier targets on their list would include NSA Bahrain, various bases scattered across Iraq, and Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE. Now, to actually reach these sprawling bases, Iran relies heavily on its formidable ballistic missile arsenal. We're talking specifically about weapons like the Fateh 110, which can fly about 300 kilometers, and the Qiyam-1, which can reach way out to 800 kilometers. These systems essentially give Tehran the long arm they need to project power and try to deter any further intervention across the Gulf. But here is the really crucial part. It's how these payloads are delivered. To strike an expansive airbase effectively, these missiles don't just hit the dirt. They often deploy proximity fuses. These are designed for an airburst effect, meaning they detonate while still in the air, just above the surface. It's a very specific, nasty tactic meant to maximize fragmentation and significantly increase the blast radius over these incredibly vulnerable installations. As we wrap up this explainer on the anatomy of a strike, we're really forced to look at the bigger strategic picture. The tactics we've seen on both sides, from multi-million-dollar stealth fighters enforcing defense in depth to dirt-cheap proxy drone swarms and ballistic airbursts, they're all highly, highly calculated. But it leaves us with a pretty profound question about the future of warfare. When the cost of defending against a threat so vastly outpaces the cost of actually creating it, who really holds the long-term advantage? It's a complex, challenging reality of modern security that both sides are going to have to grapple with moving forward. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what's on the horizon.